Colorado State University, there is an urban legend surrounding the bizarre architecture of the Student Services Building. Allegedly, the architect was starting to go insane and intended this building to be his last project. After that, he would kill his wife, then entomb her and himself within the building. There are a few variations on this. Some say he wanted to do so cask of Amontillado style, with his wife chained to the wall of an alcove, while he bricked himself in from behind. Others say he would have vanished into some kind of chamber beneath the floor in the basement, and would later be found embracing his wife's dead body. Or that we never would have found them, and he was just that good of an architect. What is true, however, is that the architecture is rather bizarre. I've went to investigate it recently. I noticed that it almost seems to resemble my houses from hell in The Sims, where you can't get from one side of the house to the other. I hadn't heard of any variation of the legend suggesting that the architect was going to entomb himself in between the student services buildings, but maybe he could have done so there. That's assuming it was real. I remembered that high school students or summer camp kids would sometimes visit in the summer and play hide and seek, since the campus would open the student services building and let them play in it when it got dark out. I noticed that sometimes the stairways would get incredibly cramped, and I found myself on the second floor without actually walking up the stairs. I wondered how the hell this happened. In addition to the cramped stairways, some of the hallways got really narrow. Not narrow enough to be really claustrophobic, but narrow enough to bring up one question to me: how on earth did they get the furniture in here? I stopped by a few offices to ask some of the people in there if they had a moment. I asked one person at the end of one of these hallways how they got their furniture in. She seemed to be used to this, and she told me that she and a lot of people had to actually get their furniture in through the windows if they couldn't bring the box in through the hall and then assemble it. I then looked at the windows and noticed how large they were, or how it could have been possible to move certain pieces of furniture in there. I didn't stop to think what would have happened if they ever had to remove the furniture that needed to be assembled. The architecture in the Student Services Building didn't even seem to be that weird, just kind of narrow or awkward. Maybe I was more used to something being really, really bizarre. Or maybe this really was that, a legend. The final stop I made was to the janitor's office. If there's anyone who knows anything about the building, it would be them. The janitor told me he got asked questions about the supposed insane architect all the time. He had worked at the campus long enough that he remembered a few things. To clarify, there is some truth in this legend. The architect was committed to a mental hospital shortly after the building was completed. He didn't know the architect personally, so he couldn't confirm whether or not the architect was having marital problems, but that there doesn't seem to be much information about him anyways. But as for any plans to entomb himself and his wife inside the building, the janitor told me that it could have just been something thought up to scare gullible freshmen. But people would cite a few rooms inside the Student Services Building as proof that the legend was real, since they were intended to be tombs. He showed me a few of these rooms that people said were going to be the tomb of the architect and his wife, at least according to some students. When I saw them, I couldn't exactly believe it that much. However, some of these rooms did strike me as odd. He used them as broom closets and pointed out that of these 3 suspiciously placed broom closets, only one had an actual door. The other 2 were alcoves, and doors were put in while the building was being constructed because nobody thought of any practical use for these alcoves aside from broom closets or storage rooms. However, when I looked over them, I noticed that some of them had just enough room for 2 people to sandwich themselves inside. When I stepped back from one alcove with a narrow opening, I noticed that it was around the section that walled off half of the Student Services Building from the other half, and I wondered what would have happened if you did obtain enough bricks to wall yourself in, given the narrow hallway into the broom closet. Maybe that's just me overthinking things.